All right, hello everyone. Welcome to International Sports Hub's first official NBA podcast. I'm Daniel Zimmermann, International Sports Hub's founder, and I'm joined by Alex Flock, Grant Thomas, Corey Birdman, and Zach Washburn today to talk about the NBA offseason. So let's get started. First up, we have the Atlantic Division. Which teams made the biggest improvement, and if you had to choose one, who would be the rising star out of that division after this offseason? Corey, what do you think?
So this offseason, I really thought the New York Knicks did a really good job improving their team. They were kind of the butt of some jokes after failing to sign big targets like Marc Gasol and LaMarcus Aldridge, but they were still able to make some good signings with Robin Lopez, Aaron Aflalo, and Kyle O'Quinn among them, and drafting Kristaps Porzingis and Jerry and Grant will just, I think, make them a much more respectable team. Not necessarily a playoff team this year, but they should be much better, and they're headed in the right direction.
Those are some good points. Zach, what about you?
I picked Toronto just because I looked it up a little bit, and there's a lot of issues with Lou Williams as the sixth man last year. Kind of a guy who took a lot of shots and really kind of made the offense a lot worse. So DeMar Carroll should help that a lot, picking the offense back up and the defense. And Biyombo's just another good backup to back up Valanciunas, and DeLon Wright was a great draft pick.
Yeah, Jonas Valanciunas just got a big extension yesterday, but actually a lot smaller than most people thought. In 4 years, 64 mil, with a player option for the fourth year, fully guaranteed. With the rising salary cap, that was a surprise, considering he could have been in the range of 20 million a year. But yeah, Alex, what about you?
I took the grain on this one, and I actually went with the Boston Celtics. Really liked what they did this past offseason. I think it truly started actually last season when they dealt a first-round pick over to Phoenix to get Isaiah Thomas, a guy who is in true contention for Sixth Man of the Year this past season, and I think will certainly be a contender for the award this year. Going back into the draft, I think drafting R.J. Hunter at 28th overall was an absolute steal, a guy certainly could have gone in the late lottery. Guy's a dead-eye shooter and really provides Boston with a versatile weapon on the wing that they have not had in the past. I also like Jordan Mickey at 33rd overall, although he is 6'8". Guy averaged over 3 blocks per game at LSU last season. I think that could certainly help Boston off the bench. Likewise, I think retaining Jay Crowder gives Boston a lot of flexibility on the wing. And just a subtle move, adding David Lee gives the team a really experienced veteran who's been around the league for a while, earned a championship last year with Golden State, and really with a team-first mentality, I think could do a lot of good for that team.
Yeah, but looking at the Celtics, I thought they made three key odd moves this summer that just didn't help at all. I thought the Terry Rozier pick at 16 overall was a poor draft selection, considering Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart, and Isaiah Thomas all occupy that 1 and 2 guard spot. And also, I thought the crowding in the front court. David Lee, I understand, was a good purchase from Golden State, but Amir Johnson, what do you think about that, Flock?
You know, Amir Johnson, he's a guy who's very tough-nosed, works in the paint. I think one thing that Boston's been a little disappointed with has been some of the lackluster play of Jared Sullinger. Sullinger, in my opinion, a very good, very talented player, but has been known to take off plays from time to time. I think Amir Johnson bringing the sort of aura about himself that he had in Toronto as a really tough paint worker, a good rebounder, solid post defender. I think that could only help. Going on your reference to Terry Rozier, although the pick was certainly questionable, there's often been the argument that had the picks been switched, R.J. Hunter at 16 and then Rozier at 28, a lot of people wouldn't be having this debate. I think Rozier brings a lot of versatility to the backcourt. Although the backcourt's crowded, it gives Boston's front office a lot of room to maneuver and experimentation with what they're trying to do, especially in a weak Eastern Conference when they can very easily be a playoff team again.
Definitely. Of the three guys that Boston had beforehand, so Kelly Olynyk, Jared Sullinger, and Tyler Zeller, which three would you say is the most likely to get traded?
Which three or which out of the three?
Which of the three?
That's actually a very tough question. I believe that Kelly Olynyk is probably the most valuable trade chip. Has had some steady improvement over the past couple of years. Still a young kid, still trying to acclimate himself to the system. Certainly needs to put on some more weight and some muscle to be able to bang in the paint with some of the bigger guys in the league. I think most likely he'd be the most valuable trade chip for Boston.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Which team from the Central Division, so that's Cleveland, Milwaukee, Chicago, Indiana, and Detroit, made the biggest improvement? Grant, what would you say?
I'd go definitely with the Bucks. They did lose some key pieces in Dudley and Ilyasova, but Greg Monroe easily makes up for that. They're a small market team, but now with the cap changing, these kind of teams can grab these big, expensive players. And his contract is very cap friendly because the way it was designed, I mean, they can just flip him for some younger assets in a couple years if it doesn't end up working out. It's a very good signing for them. Grievous Vasquez coming over from Toronto. He can provide some shooting if Michael Carter-Williams goes cold one night. And we all know that that can happen. And that Antetokounmpo, I'm trying to pronounce his name correctly, and Jabari Parker combo can really be some dynamite once they start improving. They're both still very young.
Definitely agreed. Zach, would you agree with the Bucks, or do you have a different mind?
I like the Pacers a lot more because of Monte Ellis and Joe Young. Joe Young, you guys hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Monte Ellis and Joe Young are really good additions to their backcourt with Rodney Stuckey and George Hill. And George Hill got hurt last year, and it really kind of cost them in the playoffs. And Joe Young's a great shooter. Averaged 20 points in the Pac-12 last year, one of the best scorers in the Pac-12. And he was kind of underrated in the draft, really kind of under the radar. Not many people looked at him, but he was a great pick. And you know they lost Roy Hibbert and David West. They lose that $13 million they had to pay for Roy Hibbert and get a productive guy like Rakeem Christmas, and even Jordan Hill could come in there, and he's a good 10-10 guy you can expect to play well every day.
Yeah, and also Miles Turner with that 11th pick, he's shown some promise in summer league. He could be a very like a revolutionary big man with his shooting stroke. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, extremely athletic too.
I just want to add something that we're certainly just glossing over. I mean, Paul George has a full off season. That's a big deal for a lot of people. A guy who didn't play much last year because of his big leg injury. That's a big deal for a full off season. That could really get this team going.
Definitely. So a lot of people would say Miami from the Southeast Division grew the most this offseason. Does anyone object to that?
I said the Magic.
Why would you say the Magic?
And I said the Magic not because I felt like Miami made a couple role moves, kind of getting guys like really good role players. But I mean, they did bring back Wade, which is really necessary. But Luol Deng is, I thought it'd be better. They would have been more improved if he would have left rather than they would have kept him. And Mario Hezonja is a phenomenal player, really good skill set in the offense. He really just dominated the league in Spain, which is known as the best league in Europe. And now they have a backup for Elfrid Payton if he goes down, Shabazz Napier, and Willie Green's another solid role player too. And I felt like when they got guys like Gerald Green, he's mostly just a shooter, but he shot 36. He hasn't shot over 40% from three, only one season out of his 9 seasons. So I just thought the Magic have a really good chance this year. So I feel like they improved more just adding Mario.
Yeah, they'll also get a healthy Aaron Gordon back, and they signed C.J. Watson, the veteran guard. So yeah, a lot of moves going down in Florida this summer. All right, moving on to the Western Conference. In the Northwest Division, which is Portland, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Denver, and Utah. Does anyone stand out in that division? I said Minnesota, mostly because, of course, Karl Anthony Towns at number 1 and Tyus Jones at number 24 in the draft. But I really liked the extension for Kevin Garnett, a 2-year deal that he could play both years of. and veteran presences like Tayshaun Prince and Andre Miller. Those are just going to further the progression of these young guys, and we could see a legitimate contender in Minnesota in 2-3 years. Does anyone disagree with that?
No, I totally agree. I really think Minnesota had a really good offseason. Obviously, the addition of Towns will be huge. He should be a franchise corner piece for years to come, along with Andrew Wiggins, who, after his Rookie of the Year performance last year, looks poised to improve further and rank among the league's elite in the next couple of seasons. I totally agree with you. I think Minnesota was had the best offseason in that division.
Grant, do you agree?
Oh, easily. I mean, I think Tyus Jones is a little bit of an underrated addition as well. He is kind of gone under the radar due to his size, but with Rubio and his shot being very inconsistent, Jones shows that he's very consistent with his shot at Duke, and he brings that to the NBA. Towns' defense is always going to be there, even if his offensive game doesn't develop as well as Jahlil Okafor's in Philadelphia does. And Garnett, I definitely agree with that extension. Perfect mentor for Towns, and just giving some advice for Wiggins on how to deal with the spotlight when you're so young. That can be very valuable.
The only thing I have a problem with is Tayshaun Prince and Garnett can only play so many games. They're probably really valuable for the long run, but next year I just kind of feel like it's not going to be that good for them because they can't play a lot and they're just not as productive as they used to be.
Yeah, I don't actually think their production is what's going to be so helpful. I think it's Tayshaun Prince teaching Andrew Wiggins and Shabazz Muhammad how to be a premier wing in the NBA, and Kevin Garnett teaching Karl Towns and Georgie Ding how to be post guys and be big rebounding presences in the NBA. I don't think I don't think Kevin Garnett or Tayshaun Prince will actually play that many minutes. I just think their presence in practice and on the team will do wonders in the long haul.
I agree.
I think the real losers here, though, is definitely the fans in Portland. They must have been so confused this offseason that Nicholas Batum trade ended up being just the start of what was a disastrous offseason. It saw them sign 4 or 5 guys that play the same position, and I don't know. I just don't know what they're doing out there in Portland. You know, you got Mason Plumlee, Noah Vonleh, Ed Davis, Myers Leonard, all these guys who they're paying money to. I just don't see how that team's gonna end up anything other than rock bottom next season. So moving on to the Pacific Division, which is all the California teams and the Phoenix Suns. Which team made the biggest improvement? Grant, what would you say?
Well, I'd say easily it's the Clippers. They have an extremely deep squad. I mean, just based on last year, the Paul Griffin and DeAndre Jordan combo wasn't able to compete with teams like Houston and Golden State. But this year with Paul Pierce, Lance Stevenson, Josh Smith, these are all role-playing pieces that can really complement that big three. But they have not been together long enough to compete with teams with great chemistry like San Antonio and Golden State. It looks good on paper, but we have yet to see whether it can work out on the court.
Yeah, Zach, you disagree. You said the Lakers. Why'd you say the Lakers?
I didn't think that the Clippers didn't really improve. Just because I thought the Lakers did a much better job improving, just because of how bad they were last year. Roy Hibbert is a decent rim protector when he's kind of active. You know, he's been hasn't been his best the last couple of seasons, but when he's at his prime or playing his best, he's definitely a great rim protector. Brandon Bass brings some more depth, and D'Angelo Russell is really going to help that guard position because, I mean, Jeremy Lin was our starting point guard last year, and he was one of the worst starting point guards in the league last year. And Julius Randle's back, so they can't get much worse than they were last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think their biggest problem now is who to play because you got Jordan Clarkson, D'Angelo Russell, Lou Williams, and Kobe Bryant all at guard positions. The front court was a big need for them, but they will have Randle back. Hibbert, you're right, Zach is a big presence when he's actually trying on defense. So I do think they could be a pretty good team. Alex, do you see success in their future?
I'm going to be brutally honest, and I think the Lakers bought a ticket on the Titanic. I don't like any of the moves they made this year. I think, although similar to the Celtics in backing up the back or in adding so much talent to the backcourt, I think they added too much. You're talking about guys like Jordan Clarkson, D'Angelo Russell, Kobe Bryant, Nick Young. All of these guys have to play. And I think for guys that are blooming stars, or not necessarily stars, but blooming young talent like Jordan Clarkson and D'Angelo Russell, guys who need minutes on the floor, there's been some suggestions that Kobe Bryant might move to the 3. I think that is almost comical to consider. Although Kobe Bryant has been a phenomenal player during his career, I think that he's at a time in his Laker life where he shouldn't have to move to the 3. I think in terms of the size of players now, it's going to be hard for him to do a lot of the things that he's been accustomed to over the course of his career. At the same time, I think having Roy Hibbert alongside Julius Randle could work one of two ways. Like it was recently brought up, Roy Hibbert could certainly stand out and be a very productive addition. But I don't see that. I see Roy Hibbert, and I see a guy who's 7'2", and a guy who does not get the amount of rebounds that a guy who's 7'2" should. I think that you should not put so much pressure on Julius Randle to get all those rebounds, and I think Roy Hibbert's inability to be tenacious throughout all 48 minutes of the game, or as many minutes as he's on the floor, is not going to shed lightly on Julius Randle. I just think the Lakers are paying too much money to be a middle-of-the-road team in the West who's not going to get a playoff berth, when I think they could easily just do their thing and just settle for high draft picks and continue to build the youth core. And I just think that they did not do well this offseason.
Yeah, you touched on Kobe Bryant moving to the 3. I think we definitely should give him some time to. I don't even think he should have to prove himself, but after all these injuries, he's going to come out this season and have to prove himself, because it's probably, to be honest, either moving to the 3 or moving to the bench and becoming a 6th or 7th man if the Lakers are going to give their young guys the time they need. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, final division review. In the division with all 3 Texas teams, plus Memphis and New Orleans, a lot of teams in this division made big strides. Corey, who would you say made the biggest stride to become the best?
Contrary to the popular belief of people saying San Antonio with their LaMarcus Aldridge signing, I actually think it was Houston who had the biggest improvement in the division this summer. Their trade for Ty Lawson, to me, may be the best move of the offseason if he can get his head together and stay right off the court. Obviously, that's a big if, but I think in a more focused environment, I think he can do it. And if he does, the 1-2-3 punch of Lawson, James Harden, and Dwight Howard may be the best 1-2-3 punch in the Western Conference. And I think their supporting pieces are really good around them. I really like Houston.
I definitely agree, but San Antonio made some moves you can't look away from. Grant, what do you think about San Antonio?
I mean, Aldridge was a great signing on its own, but getting West on that veteran minimum is a great move, because he, like Aldridge, can hit that outside shot, go in, get some rebounds, and spelling Aldridge off the bench may be a great move because they need to save him for the playoffs. Aldridge has shown that he can perform well in those clutch situations, and having West behind him will definitely give him some confidence. And signing Kawhi Leonard to that max deal will help keep that chemistry up. Playing on the cloud of a one-year contract is never good for these young guys, so getting him signed to a long-term is great. And Danny Green will continue to give these guys on the Spurs a nice outlet for that deep shot.
Yeah, the city of San Antonio owes so much to not only Tim Duncan, who has provided so much for the city, but also Danny Green, who he probably left $30-40 million on the table this offseason to re-sign. So that was a really cool thing to see, that Greg Popovich still has his team loyal. All right, moving on. We touched on it in our Pacific Division preview, but how will the new LA teams look. The Lakers added veteran talent with a potential superstar in D'Angelo Russell, and the Clips strengthened their entire roster with some big names coming over. So Corey, which of these teams made the bigger improvement?
I'm gonna go with the Clippers between the two. Unlike Alex, I do like what the Lakers did this offseason. I think D'Angelo Russell is, personally, I think he's the best player in that draft class, and I think he's my pick for Rookie of the Year. But between the two, I'm still going to go with the Clippers because I think the addition of guys like Paul Pierce and Lance Stevenson will really pay huge dividends. There's a bit of an issue to me with how Stevenson and Jamal Crawford will mesh together off of the bench. They're just guys who both need the ball in their hands, and that could be somewhat of an issue. But I still think that the additions of those guys, plus other people like Josh Smith and Wesley Johnson, should really make the Clippers a team that has a great shot at making the finals, as they'll finally have more talent outside of their big three that can really affect games and play at a high level.
Definitely. Corey, give me win predictions for both the Clippers and Lakers.
I'm gonna go with the Lakers somewhere in like the low to mid 30s. So definitely an improvement, but still not playoff worthy. And the Clippers, I think, should be somewhere around 55, 56, 57 wins, which should come in around third, maybe in the West.
Alex, do you agree with those win predictions?
I think they're certainly viable, although there's certainly been some positive buzz from everybody about some of the Lakers' moves. I see the Lakers as more of a mid to high 20 win team. I just don't see the improvement there. The Western Conference is extremely tough through and through. We consider that a lot of the teams played injured for a majority of the year last year, and some of the best teams in the West struggle to get those bottom tier seeds, but they win a lot of games, and I think that the Lakers would certainly be around the mid 20 or high 20 range. I'd probably cap it at 32 at the highest. Clippers, though, I think that the prediction is certainly correct. I see the Clippers as doing a lot of damage this year. I think if any of the top tier teams get hit with injuries or any type of trouble, I think that the Clippers will certainly be one of those teams ready to take up the spot towards the top of the West. And that's certainly just commenting on all their positive offseason moves.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a bold prediction here. I think this could be the first year that we see 4 teams nearly reach 60 wins. I think the Clippers, Warriors, Spurs, and Rockets could all approach that 60-win benchmark because the West is deeper than it's ever been, not just at the top, but in general. So let's move on. Another Western Conference team who had their name in the news a lot, mostly for bad reasons, but for some good, I'd say. The Kings, the Sacramento Kings, they signed 6 players this offseason, including their draft pick. Do those 6 players, Marco Bellinelli, Seth Curry, Caron Butler, Willie Cauley-Stein, Rajon Rondo, and Costa Koufos, does that make the Kings a fringe playoff team? Corey, what do you think?
I mean, on paper, they have a really good roster, but that team in that situation is such a mess. They're just rotating guys in and out. They don't really have any continuity, and they just can't seem to keep their stud, DeMarcus Cousins, happy with all the trade rumors floating around. And something interesting that most people wouldn't know, but last year's Kings starting lineup of Darren Collison, Ben McLemore, Rudy Gay, Jason Thompson, and Cousins actually was in the top 5 in the league for plus minus among 5-man lineups. So what do they do with that lineup? They trade away Jason Thompson to Philadelphia in a salary dump, and they demote Collison to the bench for Rajon Rondo, who I don't even think is an upgrade. So sure, they have some talent. They had some good signings. Like I think Costa Koufos is very good, but I don't understand what they're doing out there. So no, they're not a playoff team at all in the West, especially.
Yeah, it looks like Zach agrees with you. Zach, what do you think?
I mean, they didn't get anybody good, really. Marco Bellinelli was played about 5 to 10 minutes on the Spurs, who were a championship-worthy team, championship contender-type team. He played 5 to 10 minutes a game. Seth Curry hasn't proved anything. Caron Butler, I mean, he can be productive, but This doesn't make you a playoff team in the West. And Rondo has really not done anything the past couple years, really to show that he's still that top 5, top 10 type of point guard. And Costa Kufos, it's just Costa Kufos. Really kind of just a role player. So they just got a bunch of role players. Doesn't make you a playoff team at all.
Yeah, but the thing is, when you have explosive talent like Cousins, McLemore, Gay, you don't want to surround them with more big name, big volume shooter kind of guys. You want to provide them comfort. And so I'm personally a fan of this Kings offseason because, yeah, they took a risk with Rondo, but everyone else was a pretty safe bet. You know Marco Bellinelli is going to get out there and make a three-point shot or two. You know Caron Butler is going to help your young guys mature. You know Willie Cauley-Stein, who is an athletic freak, is going to do something for your defense. And Costa Kufos, yeah, as you said, Zach, he is just Costa Kufos, but he's been a very efficient backup big man, and he's very well liked across the league. So, I mean, I don't know if they're a fringe playoff team, but I definitely think this offseason made them better. It's yet to be told how Rondo plays out. But I think if Rondo has a comeback season, a all-star type of year, this team could be a fringe playoff team.
Personally, I think it's one or two ways for the Kings. I think they're either going to be the season's make or break with the additions. They're either going to be a very, very talented team and everything's just going to click, and you never know how it works. But like most people, I really think that too many of the personalities on that team are way too enigmatic for anything to work out. I really hope George Karl can put everything together for the team's sake, but the team's either going to be a top 6 seed and they're just going to have a very favorable playoff matchup, or they're going to be one of the least effective teams in the league, and it's just going to be very unfortunate for the Kings' sake.
The problem is Rudy Gay has not been on a team that's been able to win games except for the Grizzlies, and then the Grizzlies trade him away at the deadline. So, I mean, I don't really know, because it just feels like with Rudy Gay, he can just never get past that point where his team can make a difference, if that makes sense. Could, go farther into the playoffs, be dangerous in the playoffs. Because every time he's gone on a team that's to say, oh, it's a playoff contender, oh, they have a chance with Rudy Gay, they always fail. I mean, he shoots so poorly. If you look at his three-point shot, he's never shot over 40%, and he's shot over. And the last couple seasons in Sacramento, his 2-point shot is below 500. So,
personally, I think it's a little unfair to Rudy Gay. I mean, like you said, he did win in Memphis, and yes, they traded him to a bad Toronto team that wasn't making the playoffs either way, and then he's been on Sacramento ever since, which really, that's not fair. Sacramento, again, they're just a mess of all messes. So I don't think it's fair to put that on Gay. He has improved his shooting percentages remarkably since joining the Kings, and he has been a useful NBA player. So I don't know. I don't think it's fair to put it on Gay. But again, I just don't really see it with the Kings. They just too much of a, I don't know, changing situation, too much of a mess there for me to see him in the playoffs.
I think a lot of the knock on Gay comes from his contracts that teams keep signing him to. I mean, he's very expensive at this point, and it's kind of manhandled the Kings' cap situation for the past couple of years. And finally, they were able to get some role players on their team. But Gay, he can be productive if he figures out his efficiency. He's very athletic. He can do a lot at his position, but at this point, he's not going to be a good fit with this Kings team. There's too many moving pieces at this point.
All right, let me give you one stat for you for Rudy Gay. So in his offensive rating versus defensive rating, every single year he's played in the NBA, his defensive rating is higher than his offensive rating, meaning he gives up more points than he scores.
Well, again, that's unfair to put it all on him. Again, he's played with the Raptors, who weren't good at the time, and then he's played with the Kings, who they've never been really that good in the past 10, 15 years, or at least ever since like Mike Bibby left. And that's been a while. So it's really, you're right. He definitely deserves a lot of the criticism he gets, but I just think it's unfair to put it on him. He has improved since joining the Kings. So I don't know. It's not just him.
I like Rudy Gay, but I just don't think with him being a centerpiece, they're playoff team. That's just what I think.
I agree with that. I don't think he should be a centerpiece of a playoff team, but he definitely can be on a good playoff team.
All right, let's move on to our final topic, which a very similar question with a very different team. So the Oklahoma City Thunder missed the playoffs last year, mostly thanks to Kevin Durant's injury problems, Serge Ibaka's injury problems, a lot of injury problems on that team. So this year, with a healthy Durant, are they a playoff contender or are they fool's gold? They didn't really sign anyone this offseason. They selected Cameron Payne in the lottery to replace Reggie Jackson, and they grossly overpaid Enes Kanter. But those were really their big moves. So, Grant, what do you think? Are they a playoff contender?
Well, I think they're always a contender. Any team is a contender if you have either Kevin Durant or LeBron James on your team. If LeBron were to go to the Timberwolves right now, they'd immediately be a playoff contender. It's just that way with these guys if they can stay healthy. Durant's definitely had a pretty bad injury history, as has Russell Westbrook. And this team, I mean, those are the big two. They don't really have another big piece that they can defer to if those guys aren't on the court or aren't playing well. And I don't think you can be a playoff team with that. And the last time they got deep into the playoffs, they had a lot more of a supporting cast for Durant. Westbrook has come a long way in the past couple years in terms of his efficiency and ability to recognize openings for passes. And I mean, he's just a triple-double machine without Durant on the court. But with Durant on the court, his production is definitely going to go down. It's a conundrum with this team, and if they're healthy, they're always a contender, but can they go deep into the playoffs? No.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that. Alex, would you agree?
I certainly agree that if the Thunder can avoid major injuries, they are easily one of the toughest teams to beat in the NBA. You're talking about the talents of Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, guys that all know how to do everything in the NBA. They can all facilitate, they can all run the offense, they can all defend extremely well, and they all know how to play off of each other. We've seen the stats when Durant's out. We've seen for Westbrook. We've seen the stats for Durant when Westbrook's out. They all play exceptionally well. It's just a case of making sure that everybody is in the right system, working at the right time. I think Billy Donovan, there could be a question mark there, but I think that his success in the college game, having produced some good talent at Florida, most notably Bradley Beal and Chandler Parsons in the most recent years, I think is very important to note for him coming into the NBA. I think he's going to mesh well with this system and this team. It's just a case of making sure the players buy in. I think although Enes Kanter did get a lot of money in his new contract, I think what he offers at center for the Thunder is far better than what Kendrick Perkins has ever offered that team. I love the intensity that Kendrick Perkins brings to any team, but at the same time, he's an offensive liability. He's on the wrong side of 30. I mean, Kendrick Perkins gets overpaid in his own right. And I think Kanter just brings some offensive versatility. Defensively, he might not be as big of a presence, but that's what you have Serge Ibaka for. So I think overall the Kanter acquisition was good. And like I said, if the team can avoid injuries, I think they are in really, really good shape to be a top seed in the West and truly be a competitor and a contender for the NBA Finals. It's fact for a team with that much talent.
Yeah, well, talking about comparing their bigs to what they once had in Kendrick Perkins, I would say that Steven Adams, who was the starter last year before they traded Reggie Jackson in that three-team deal and got Enes Kanter back, Steven Adams was very productive as a defensive-minded guy. So I do kind of like that 1-2 punch of Kanter and Adams, but I just think they're too thin on the wings. You know, when Kyle Singler and DJ Augustine are your best shooters, you don't have a deep playoff team right there. So honestly, I'm not a believer in the Thunder, but it really all depends on Durant.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, would you agree?
Just one stat I want to throw out there. The last 4 seasons with a healthy Kevin Durant, they finished in the West 4th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd. So, I mean, with Kevin Durant, they're definitely a lot better team. And Ennis Cantor was definitely a lot better than Kendrick Perkins, but I do agree with Steven Adams being very productive when he was playing. But I just feel like Kevin Durant, they're just a totally different team. And how well Russell Westbrook played last year, I mean, they could be really dangerous in the West.
Corey, anything else to add?
I would just like to say, I forget whoever said that Cantor's defense wasn't good. That's putting it very politely. Cantor is arguably the worst defender in the NBA among rotation players. His defense is terrible. Notice how much better the Jazz got on that end once they shipped him away. Granted, he was replaced with Rudy Gobert, who is arguably one of the top defenders in the league, but it's still it's insane how much the Jazz got better on that end. I personally think matching Portland's offer sheet for Cantor was a big mistake because I think they would have been better off just letting him go and giving big minutes to the guys like Steven Adams, Mitch McGary, and even Nick Collison over straddling their cap by giving $70 million to Enes Kanter over 4 years. I don't think the Thunder will even have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs this year. I think they're maybe at best going to make it to the second round of the playoffs. I just don't see it with this team.
Going back to how bad the Kanter contract was, the only team that it was worse for, or that it was good for, was Portland. You know, Portland made that offer because they were desperate for some somewhat big-name talent. I don't think anyone's happier about that deal than the Portland fans who actually have an idea of what basketball is. Because if the Portland Trailblazers have been stuck with Kanter, alongside all the people we named earlier, Ed Davis, Noah Vonleh, Mason Plumlee, I think that would have been an even bigger disaster than what we're going to see on the defensive end for Enes Kanter. So, yeah, that about wraps it up for this edition of Ish Podcast. But thanks for joining us, and make sure to tune in next week. I'm sure we'll come up with something. All right. Thanks for listening. See ya.